Jeg hedder Rikke Lydelsen, og jeg har i mere end 20 år nu brændt for at gøre en forskel for udsatte og traumatiserede børn og unge og deres familie. Både direkte og gennem undervisning og supervision af professionelle på området. Jeg har skabt podcasten Håb, fortællinger fra praksis, for at kunne give en stemme til de gode historier fra praksisfeltet, som ellers jo kun sjældent bliver delt i offentligheden. Det er et rum til deling af viden, erfaring og inspiration, gennem menneskelige fortællinger og dialoger med forskellige mennesker fra forskellige positioner i feltet, både unge og forældre, praktikere og eksperter på området. Mennesker, som har inspireret mig menneskeligt og fagligt gennem årene, og som jeg håber også vil inspirere dig som lytter. En person, som har haft skelsættende betydning for mig personligt og fagligt og for hele det professionelle felt omkring traumatiserede børn og unge på verdensplan, er den hollandske psykolog Arianne Struik, som nu bor i Australien. Jeg mødte Arianne på en konference omkring sikkerhedsplanlægning i Holland i 2012, og vi har siden samarbejdet om at få hendes Sleeping Dogs-metode til stabilisering af kronisk traumatiserede børn ud i Danmark. Det har blandt andet ført til en del åbne workshops om hendes metode og til oversættelsen af hendes bog til dansk, som hedder Behandling af kronisk traumatiserede børn, Sleeping Dogs-metoden. Når titlen indeholder ordet kronisk, er det den kliniske definition, som den henfører til, og ikke til perspektivet for heling. Tværtimod har Arianne et vigtigt og håbefuldt budskab til os professionelle, børnene, de unge og forældrene om, at traumer kan heles, og behandlingen gør forskel. Så det nytter noget at vække de sovende hunde. Jeg kan ikke lave en podcast om børn og traumer uden Ariannes vigtige budskab, hendes store viden og erfaring inden for området. Så derfor har jeg mødt hende online til en snak om emnet. Det er på engelsk, men jeg håber alligevel, du vil lytte med, når jeg nu slår over på engelsk og introducerer Arianne.
Welcome to you, Arianne, and thank you for joining me here. I've been looking so much forward to having this conversation with you.
Me too.
About something that we're both very passionate about. To start with, I would like to introduce you in more detail. Arianne Struik is a clinical psychologist, family therapist, and EMDR consultant, originally from the Netherlands, now living in Australia.
Yes.
He is the director of the Institute of Chronically Traumatized Children and provide specialized trauma treatment in remote areas, as well as workshops and trainings and supervision and research. She developed the award-winning Sleeping Dogs-method described in the book, Treating Chronically Traumatized Children.
I brought it. This is and it's translated in Danish.
Yeah.
And Dutch, of course.
And Dutch. And you just teach us internationally on trauma and dissociation in children. She's also a member of the ESTD, Child and Adolescent Committee, and the Australian Psychological Society, EMDR, Interest Group National Committee. That was a long word.
Australians like long words.
So you are the go-to person if we want to know more about trauma. And that's why I invited you to have this conversation with me. And so to start with, I would just like to ask you if you, from your perspective on trauma, could explain us what the essence of trauma is.
Yeah, so it's a very popular thing, trauma, and you see it on TV and in the news, and everything that happens that is a little bit bad or difficult, we call trauma. But from a more psychological point of view, that's of course not the case. And so what I think is the essence of trauma is that when you have experiences that are too hard to understand, too difficult, too big to process, they can get kind of stuck in your mind or in your feeling. And you can have memories of them that come back to you like flashbacks. You can have feelings that kind of keep you stuck in that moment in time, like anger or anxiety or sadness. And you can have thoughts that can keep you stuck, like I'm not good enough, it's my fault, I'm bad, I'm unsafe.
Yeah.
And I think that is the essence of trauma, that a part of us is stuck in time, in trauma time, and needs to be released.
And from your knowledge, can you explain us a little bit about the different kinds of trauma? We talk about, for example, developmental trauma and other kinds of trauma like shock trauma.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between them?
Yeah, so trauma starts with an event. Something happened. And that something that happens is too difficult to process. And then you develop symptoms. And that's when we speak of trauma in a person. So something can happen once, can develop symptoms from that, like being raped once or being in a fire or in a car accident. But if things happen more times or more chronic, like being in a war, it happens over a period of time, or being in a domestic violence family, then we call it more chronic. The impact of that kind of trauma is different because our body, from one incident, a one-time rape, for example, you can kind of recover from that. You go into a very stressed state and it's really scary, but after that, you're safe. It's happened to you chronic and it happens to you every day and it is continuous. Your body needs to adapt because you also need to just grow and develop and eat, sleep, learn. So the impact of chronic trauma is a bit different than just a single trauma.
Okay.
And then if this happens at a young age, from birth, between 0 and 3, 0 and 5, very young children. I just have 2 beautiful granddaughters, and one is 5 months old, and every week she's developing, learning new things. Last week she was here, she couldn't sit. Now she can sit. I just saw a little video. Children grow so fast. If trauma happens in that time when you're really young, and we call that early trauma, early childhood trauma, the impact is even bigger because trauma is something that happens to us and our body then gets worried. Oh, we need to save energy to survive. It stops using energy or spending energy on growing, developing, learning new things. It saves energy.
Yeah.
And that's why children with chronic trauma are sometimes small and they don't grow. So when trauma happens at a very early age, that can also stop the child from developing or slow the development down. And then the impact of trauma is not only the memories of what happened, but also the development is behind. And that's what we call developmental trauma.
Fantastic.
And then one more thing that determines like what kind of symptoms you develop is what kind of trauma it is. Is it trauma done to you by the people that you love?
Yeah.
That has a different impact than when it's done to you by something outside your family, like a fire or like a tsunami or a hurricane.
Yes, so that's a big difference.
Yeah, all of those things make a difference, yes.
And now you talk about like chronically traumatization, and I know that's a definition of it. And what is that definition of chronic traumatization?
Yeah, so chronic traumatization means that you have experienced these difficult things for a long time, chronically.
Yeah.
And you haven't just experienced it, it also impacted you, it traumatized you.
Yeah.
And that's what chronic traumatization means. And what it looks like are children that experience domestic violence, neglect within their family, or sexual abuse for a longer period of time. They develop chronic trauma.
Yes.
And then there is early chronic trauma. If it happens like before the age of 7 or 8, the impact is even more severe. And because the children are still developing, because when it happens at such an early age, usually it is the caregivers that do it to you. And also because those children cannot really understand and comprehend what's happening to them. So if you see children that are traumatized later in life, so they had a really good childhood first few years, then they're 10 years old, like in Ukraine, and a war comes, and then they have this chronic trauma happen to them. It's different because they have built safe relationships, resilience, they know about feelings, they can talk about it. So the impact is usually not as big as when it happens at a younger age. But this is generally speaking.
But I also know that you have a message of healing that is possible to do something about it. And I would like to know much more about your perspective on this. Now we know a little bit about the trauma and the impact and the chronic state of it. But what are the possibilities of healing trauma from your perspective?
Yeah, I think anyone can heal from trauma.
Yeah.
Especially children, especially young children, because the younger children are, the less they have lived with the consequences. And I've worked with a man, a veteran from the war. He was traumatized when he was 20. He was 70 years when I started working with him on his traumatic memories. Mm-hmm. But for 50 years, he lived with them. So it was really hard for him to let go and to heal, because he said to me, like, I've always had post-traumatic stress, so who am I without it? And so I think everyone can heal, but the older you get, the more it will be a different way of healing, coming to terms with it or having some symptoms released. But there's always a part of the life that's lost, that you struggling with those symptoms. But I think look at children, which is my specialty. There is so much opportunity for healing. And that's why I'm very passionate about working with traumatized children, because you can help them recover.
Yeah. And that's what you do. And that's what you teach a lot of professionals around the world to do. And by like using your Sleeping Dogs method, and that's some of the terms that you use, the awake dogs and the sleeping dogs. And can you tell us a little bit more about what the difference is about the awake dogs and the sleeping dogs, and how you approach them differently?
Yeah, so when trauma happens, children can have memories of their mom and dad fighting a lot and hitting each other. And when they are able to talk about it, the treatment is quite easy, because they can tell you what they are struggling with. I can ask some questions, they tell me about it, I can help them. But when children say, don't want to talk about it, no, that didn't happen, I don't remember, it's more difficult to help them heal, because they don't want to tell me. So, like 30 years ago, everyone used to think, if children don't want to talk about it, you shouldn't force them. You should just wait until they start talking about it. But those children became adults, and then they finally were ready and they got therapy. And a lot of those adults said to me, I wish someone helped me when I was a child, because I didn't want to talk about it, but I actually did. I just didn't know how. And I wish I had someone like you who helped me to open up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say about these children that don't want to talk about it or are resistant, they say, let's not wake up sleeping dogs. If we start talking about it, we make them upset and they start to cry, become more violent. We don't want to wake up sleeping dogs. And that's a saying.
Yeah. So
and that's where it comes from. So the sleeping dogs are the traumas that the child doesn't want to talk about. When the dogs are awake, and that's what my treatment is about, try to wake them up without the dogs attacking you or attacking the child, and wake them up safely so that and the trauma becomes accessible. That's what the term sleeping dogs comes from.
And now that we're talking about being afraid of talking with the children about trauma, I experience a lot of professionals that is afraid of doing more harm than good if children are starting to talk about their trauma with them, or something like the awake dogs. But still, if they use them as a safe person to actually start talking about their trauma, and if they're not trauma therapists, they're like, might be afraid of doing more harm than healing. And
Yeah.
what is your advice to these people that feels like this?
I think we're doing a lot of harm when we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Because the child on the inside has those memories, thinks about it every day, lives with a huge amount of guilt, feels really bad, feels worthless. And when we don't talk about it, we can't help them with it. They feel lonely. We can't share. So I think talking about it, even when you're saying maybe the wrong things, is better than leaving it. And I know that it is scary to do because you feel the children's hurt, but it is so much nicer for them and better for them if they can share it with you than when they are alone with it. And there's a few guidelines in what to do and what not to do.
Okay.
So there is a way of bringing more harm. And that's what very often happens when children disclose, for example, sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And we call it victim blaming.
Yeah.
So blaming the victim. So our natural response, and when a child discloses sexual abuse, for example, is to say, why didn't you tell me sooner? I could have helped you. Ow, the child feels blamed.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Or why did you go and get drunk? You shouldn't have gotten so drunk because now this boy took you home and you couldn't do anything. Why did you get in the car?
Yeah.
Why didn't you say something? Why did you even go there? So and the questions that we ask naturally will come to our mind when someone discloses that, because it's a big shock. Like, what am I going to say? Are these kind of questions. So when you work with these kids, it is good to practice what to ask and what not to say. And one of the things you can say is, wow, I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you told me. And how can I help you? Or you can talk to the child about like who's responsible. Because when you talk about trauma and children start to become really, really upset, if you say to them, oh, that's so hard, that's so difficult, you must have been so scared, I really feel for you. When you go into the feeling and give them empathy, they go more into the feeling, and that you connect to them and they feel supported. But you also risk them going more into the feeling and feeling even more bad. The trick to get them out of the bad feeling is to say, wow, you are so strong. You survived all of that by yourself and you never told someone. Wow. You are so strong. And focusing on the child as a survivor, and how did you do that? How did you manage to not think about it? Wow, your brain is really smart, and that you can push it away in the back of your mind and never think about it. Wow. So focus on the strong part of the child and on the cognitive side. So and when this happened, what do you think? Who is responsible and who was wrong? You when you were 5, or the adults? Like who should have done something? So talk about the cognitions and the thoughts that the child has. That is a cognitive exercise, so about thinking, and that takes them out of the feeling, and that is a safe area to go. Or how long ago is this? Are you worried it can happen again? How can you make yourself safe? And so create a distance between the safe now and the past where this happened.
Yeah, so that's like here and now, it's safe and it's over. And and the trauma, as you said, is like trauma time that was back then. Yeah. And try to get them back into the here and now and just yeah. That was very helpful. That was very concrete and but things. I think that's what we need, right? In this in the work with with children and trauma, that we need to have some hands-on advices and techniques, and that we can practice and get some experience in doing it to make it safe for ourselves to work with them. So that was very helpful, Arianne. Thanks.
Can I say one more thing?
Bring it on.
So if a child has told you a lot of their trauma, it can be a little bit uncomfortable or strange, like, how do I end the conversation? And usually children tell you this the minute that you need to go. For example, at the end of a session or at the end of your shift, or when they have to go to bed and you're saying, okay, good night now, and then it comes all out. So you don't really have time to sit down with them. So the way to end this conversation is say, okay, we're going to stop talking about it now, but it's really important what you told me. And I also want to have a think about it and talk a little bit more with you about it in a different time. So let's think of a place, imaginary, or they can draw a picture of it. Like, where do you want to put all these bad memories and all these thoughts and feelings? Where do you want to put them away so you can go and sleep? Or you can go to school and not think about it, and put them in a safe deposit box or in a hole in the ground or in a safe, wherever they want to put it. And in my book, I describe this exercise, like how can you do that with children? And by storing it away, and sometimes I even grab a tissue box, I rip all the tissues out. I say, okay, let's put all of it in here. And with young children, if you make it concrete, it really helps. And in that way, you kind of end the conversation safely and calm them down before they go and do something else.
Yeah, and now that you talk about calm them down, I remember that you were the one who introduced me first time I met you to the calm brains that you talked about.
Yes,
I think maybe that's the place to end this conversation here, is just to share a little bit about what what calm brains is and what difference it makes for the children.
Yeah, so the calm brain, the term calm brain, I learned that from my friend Deb Wesselman from the US.
Yeah.
And she works a lot with adopted children and the parents of those adopted children that can be really, really struggling with a difficult behavior. And the term calm brain, what that means is that you as an adult stay calm and don't get overwhelmed yourself, because when you are calm, the child can feel calm. And when these children all of a sudden tell you about all these things, about the trauma, about their parents, about sexual abuse, about physical abuse, it can be stressful. And it is important to know how you can calm yourself down, because we need to stay cool and collected so that the child feels safe enough to talk about it to us. And they need someone with a calm brain, because these children are focused and they are attuned to others. They know exactly how other people feel. That's how they protect themselves. So if you become a little bit stressed or uncomfortable or I don't know what to say, they feel it and they don't say anything. That's why there will be some of your colleagues that children always tell all their stories to, and other colleagues that never have that. But that is because children feel that you are a little bit uncomfortable with it. So that's why it's good to prepare yourself, and like the techniques I just told you, or one other thing that's important to know in the context where you work, country that you work, what are the rules? If someone discloses to you that they are being hit by their father or being sexually abused by the mother, right now, what do you do? Who do you call? Do you call the police, child protection? If you know really clearly what to do and what to say, that can keep your brain a lot calmer. So be prepared for all the kinds of situations that can happen. Have a plan and practice it. Yeah, it's like when you have a fire in your building, in your office. You've ever had a fire drill where you practice where to go when there's a fire, and once every couple of years your boss wants to do that and they turn the fire alarm off and you all go outside.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple of months later, you forget the drill. And so with this kind of work, when you work with children that could disclose trauma to you, practice it every month, get your rules together, like what do I do, so that you're prepared, and that can keep your brain a lot calmer.
Thank you so much, Arianne. I think it's time to wrap up. I could just keep listening to you and asking you questions, but it's time. And I just want to say thank you so much for showing up here today with me and talking and sharing all your knowledge and experience and all the techniques and everything that, that makes it somehow more simple or more safe, and both simple and safe to work with traumatized children. And I just really appreciate you that you are so kindly sharing with us all. So, I guess that was it. Just appreciate.
Yeah, I think if people think, I would like to know a little bit more about that topic or about that topic, maybe they can email you and we can arrange another meeting. It's always nice to have a chat with you about
and
topics.
I also like to say that you do, and again, I know you're graciously like sharing your knowledge and experience, and also on your social media that you also share a lot of tips and tricks or ideas and from your experience. That's, as you just did with us, simple and easy to understand, and go do and practice, so people can also start following you and get more of this on your Insta and Facebook and LinkedIn profile. So
so LinkedIn is the Institute for Chronically Traumatized Children, and then Facebook and Instagram is my name. But if you look on my website, which is ariannestruik.com, then you find links to all my social media. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very
much, and have a beautiful day.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.
Til slut vil jeg sige tusind tak, fordi du lyttede med. Jeg håber, du fandt det rigtig inspirerende, og så vil jeg minde dig om, at der er håb for healing.